You may remember a while back the story of the Eucharistic miracle at that church in Connecticut when the Eucharistic minister, he was low on host and the host multiplied. Suddenly there were more than enough. I'm not sure if the Vatican made a ruling on that, but I do sometimes wonder when I'm distributing communion and getting low if God would multiply the host for us. And I wouldn't put it past him. I have faith and confidence that he would if it was necessary. But how amazing would it be to witness miracles like this, or even some of the miracles attributed to the saints, like the miraculous healings, saints with the stigmata, or even think about the levitations of saints like St. Joseph of Cupertino, and then all those Eucharistic miracles that you hear about. I think most of us would admit that the supernatural is exciting. It's not the ordinary, and at times it can defy the laws of nature. Well, Elijah, in our first reading, he witnessed a pretty awesome event. In his battle against the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, he witnessed the power of God coming down from the heavens and consuming his sacrifice in a flame of fire. And this proved that Elijah was the prophet of God and the prophets of Baal were false. And Elijah, he ended up having those prophets put to death. Well, that didn't sit well with Queen Jezebel. In the reading today, Elijah's on the run because Jezebel's planning to kill him for putting her prophets to death. And Elijah, he's arrived at Mount Horeb. And what we hear today stands in opposition to the mighty display of power on Mount Carmel. God, he doesn't come to Elijah in a powerful manifestation, but he comes to him in a still, small voice. I think the message that this conveys is that we shouldn't always be searching for God and the miraculous or wait for him to powerfully manifest himself to us, but we have to look for him in the ordinary, in the monotony of life, in our everyday duties. Teresa of Avila, she saw our everyday duties as opportunities to find God in a new way. And she encouraged her sisters to bring God into those obligations so that their lives could be sanctified. She said, when obedience calls you to exterior employments, as for example into the kitchen, amidst the pots and dishes, remember that our Lord goes along with you to help you both in your interior and exterior duties. And she even spoke more highly of these moments than the greatest spiritual experiences. She said, it is manifest that the highest perfection does not consist in interior delights, nor in sublime raptures, nor in visions, nor in having the gift of prophecy, but in making our will so conformable with the will of God, that whatever we know he shall desire, that also we shall desire with our whole affection. And we shall receive what is bitter as joyfully as what is sweet and pleasant, remembering that such is the will of his divine majesty. Now, this can be a pretty hard thing to do, receiving what's bitter as joyfully as what's sweet and pleasant, especially if we're like the apostles in the gospel and we find ourselves being tossed about by the storms of life. But the way to do it, especially in difficult situations, is to fix our eyes on Christ in the midst of the storms. And what's interesting about our gospel today is that Jesus, he doesn't command the waves or the wind to be still, but he commands Peter to come to him. Or in other words, he tells Peter that even in the midst of the storms, you can find me. You just have to look for me and keep your eyes fixed on me. And we learn that when he takes his eyes off our Lord, he starts to sink. And so we have to remain with Jesus throughout the day by keeping our eyes fixed on him. And one way to do this is by practicing recollection. Teresa of Avila, she'd say that you do well to keep an image of our Lord with you at all times. In part, she said this because she didn't have the greatest imagination, and so it was difficult for her to imagine our Lord, and so she liked to keep an image with her. But ultimately, recollection is living in the presence of God, and little things like keeping an image with us, whether it's physical or imaginative, that can help us live in his presence by reminding us of God and his presence to us. I remember when I was in seminary, one of the seminarians, he was trying to be recollected all day. And I'm not sure how it went, but it's very possible. I read that for St. Faustina, to abide with God in the interior of her soul became her life. She said, "I know God is in my heart, and the fact that I feel Him in my heart does not interfere with my duties. Even when I'm dealing with very important matters which require my attention, I do not lose the presence of God in my soul, and I'm closely united with Him. With Him I go to work. With Him I go for recreation. With Him I suffer. With Him I rejoice. I live in Him and He in me. I am never alone because He is my constant companion. He is present to me at every moment." Well, God is present to us at every moment, brothers and sisters, and while the supernatural or the extraordinary phenomena can be exciting and they give us the felt assurance of God's presence, I think God finds it more pleasing that we look for Him in the ordinary. I mean, if you remember Jesus' life, it was a very ordinary life for 30 years, and it was only when He started His public ministry that He began to manifest more powerful signs of His divinity. And so we have to strive to be recollected throughout our day, to find God among the pots and pans in our lives. And when we do this, everything becomes a joy because it all becomes a labor of love. And we'll find peace in our lives because Jesus will always be with us as our constant companion and guide.